Long ago, a prosperous kingdom suddenly vanished without a trace. During an earthquake many years ago, a man appeared, claiming to be the king of this forgotten land. He explained that his kingdom had been sealed underground by a sorcerer. The king promised to reward anyone who could kill the sorcerer. Thus began the era of dungeon expeditions, and our main character, Laios, along with his companions, found themselves struggling against a fire dragon. Exhausted from not eating for a long time, they were easily defeated. Fallon used the last of her strength to teleport everyone out of the dungeon. Later, Laios was awakened by Marcy's voice. He told her that Fallon had been swallowed by the dragon. Determined to rescue her, Laios planned to return to the dungeon. Marcy, saddened, mentioned that most of their belongings were left behind in the dungeon. Timms reported that 2 team members had left, joining another party. To re-enter the dungeon successfully, they needed supplies, medicine, and companions, but Laios had no money. He suggested that Marcy and Timms leave the team and sell their equipment to fund his solo rescue mission. However, they insisted on accompanying him. Upon reaching the dungeon, Laios decided they would use the dungeon's resources for food. Creatures eating plants would be attacked by carnivorous ones, implying that dungeon creatures could be hunted like livestock. Marcy hesitated, imagining disgusting creatures, but they encountered a panicked group of hunters. Marcy knocked out a mushroom creature, and Laios intended to cook it. Marcy refused to eat such things. They caught more creatures, but not being skilled cooks, they simply threw everything into a pot. Laios tried the stew but vomited. A passerby named Senshi offered to help, teaching them to properly prepare the ingredients. He even used his own pot and foraged wild vegetables. Despite Marcy's protests about using ingredients from a graveyard, they managed to cook a surprisingly delicious meal. Senshi shared that he had been studying dungeon cuisine for 10 years. Laios was impressed by the taste, and even Marcy, though reluctant, enjoyed it. After the meal, Senshi introduced himself and inquired about their mission. Laios shared the previous day's events, and Senshi, intrigued by the red dragon, asked to join their team to cook it as a delicacy. On the second dungeon level, an ancient forest, Marcy, exhausted from the journey, prompted Laios to set up camp. Hunting for dinner was their first priority. Laios asked Marcy what kind of dungeon creature she wanted to eat. Referring to his food guide, he listed bats, giant rats, and forest goblins, but Marcy found them too repulsive. Senshi suggested that it was fruit season, but the carnivorous plants made gathering fruit difficult. Marcy attempted to use magic to harvest fruit but was stopped by Senshi, who explained that magic would make the fruit inedible. While fighting a tree, a corpse fell out, which Laios quickly cut down. They then prepared a meal using the fruit, creating a surprisingly tasty dish despite Marcy's initial doubts. That night, Marcy dreamed of her mother cooking strange foods, waking up horrified. She smelled roasted meat and found a group of hunters cooking pork. Senshi criticized their lack of nutritional knowledge, insisting Marcy needed fats. Nearby, they saw hunters being attacked by a giant chicken. Marcy, holding its eggs, became its target. Senshi and Laios skillfully defeated it. The poison hunter was saved by Senshi's antidote, and they cooked the chicken, sharing the meal with the grateful hunter. After parting ways, Laios's group prepared to descend to the 3rd level, knowing Marcy's weakness. To prove herself, Marcy volunteered for all tasks but was only allowed to collect cursed potatoes. According to the book, pulling up cursed potatoes would cause a deadly scream, so they planned to use a dog to pull them up. Senshi, however, directly pulled up the cursed potatoes by hand, cutting off their heads before they could scream. While the 3 were busy harvesting cursed potatoes, Marcy devised a new method. She tied one end of a rope to a cursed potato and the other end to a bat's nest. Marcy then used her staff to scare the bats, causing them to fly out, dragging the cursed potato with them. The bat flew wildly before crashing into a tower. Hearing a loud explosion, the 3 rushed to check. Marcy had heard the scream and was now in a dazed state. Laios learned that she did this to prove she wasn't a burden. Laios explained that her magic was crucial for fighting higher-level bosses. Senshi then prepared a dish with the cursed potatoes, noting that Marcy's potatoes, due to the scream, were less bitter and made the meal even better. Timms was an expert in traps and secret mechanisms. He pressed a brick on the wall, successfully opening a shortcut. Tims carefully inspected each step, identifying safe spots before guiding everyone through. Unfortunately, Senshi slipped and activated a trap, almost killing Tims with a spike. Tims reprimanded Senshi, urging him to follow instructions, but Senshi ignored him and activated several traps by stepping haphazardly. He only stopped when he saw a fire trap. Tims explained that fire traps usually contained oil or gas. Senshi then had an idea for a new dish, but they needed cooking oil. Senshi asked Tims to show him where the trap was set. Soon, under Tims' guidance, they found the room with the traps. While Tims was carefully disarming the fire trap, Leos explained that Tims' caution stemmed from holding the lives of his teammates in his hands. After a while, the fire trap was disarmed, and Tims showed Senshi the oil pipeline. Tims triggered the mechanism, causing oil to squirt out. When a drop of hot oil hit Leos, he jumped up. Senshi filled a pan with the oil and checked the temperature, which was around 180 degrees. Senshi handed a bat to Tims, asking him to use the axe trap to cut it into pieces. Senshi then placed the pan of oil in Tims' hands, asking him to heat it using the fire trap. Once everything was ready, Senshi cooked the marinated food in the hot oil. Tims, having never cooked before, struggled to flip the food at the right time but eventually got the hang of it. Leos praised the delicious taste, and the relationship between Tims and Senshi improved. As they moved further, they reached a dead end. Tims tapped around and successfully opened a hidden passage. Leos realized he had lost a decorative piece on his sword, a memento from 3 years ago when he first became an adventurer. Back then, the underground castle was gilded, and stripping the gold scales earned adventurers a good amount of money. Since the outer scales were already taken, they ventured inside for luck. Suddenly, armored creatures moved and killed one of Leos' team members. To protect his sister, Leos fought them, but his sword broke. He grabbed his sword from another suit of armor, decapitated it, but it continued to fight, stabbing him. The sword Leos used was the same one he took 3 years ago. Leos was both haunted and curious about the iron-armored creatures. In the next room, lined with iron armor on both sides, Leos warned everyone to be cautious as they couldn't tell which would move. Not far in, an armored suit blocked their path. As they progressed, more armor activated. Despite being dismembered, the armor continued to fight, overwhelming the team. Marcy urged everyone to retreat, but Leos noticed something unusual. Normally, the armor only attacked those who approached, but this time they seemed controlled. They devised a plan: 3 would hold off the armor while 1 entered the room behind. Leos ended up going alone. Inside, he saw an armor set different from the others. While the others struggled, Leos had to handle this alone. This armor was far stronger than any he had faced, breaking his sword with 1 strike. He threw a brick at it, noting it used its body to shield its shield, which had something resembling an eggshell on the back. Leos suspected the key was the egg but couldn't identify the creature inside. Outside, the dismembered armor kept attacking. Leos threw a brick to distract the armor and grabbed its helmet, finding a mollusk inside. It became clear that the armor was controlled by living creatures, each part operated by a different one. Leos disassembled the armor and called his team into the next room. He explained that the armor was alive and showed them where the creatures hid.